Greetings. I hope as you view this today that all is well with you. It's funny how times like these cause us to realize all the things we take for granted. For instance, going out to eat, catching a movie, even strolling through the mall doing nothing more than window shopping, or what I like to call people shopping. It's like going to the zoo for free watching people. These are things we often do and never think twice about until we can't do them. But in the stay-at-home declaration and the closure of such businesses due to the virus, you might find yourself doing what I've been doing, longing to do those things. This leads me to another area we often take for granted: provisions, the daily things which meet our needs. If you were an alien from outer space landing here on Earth and you were made aware of the COVID-19 virus, you might think that toilet paper was the cure. Who would have ever thought that people would actually exchange blows, make a scene, or curse at each other over toilet paper? In fact, one person reported to me that Sam's Club had stationed 2 police officers at the toilet paper location because of customers exchanging blows over the precious commodity. Who would have thought that toilet paper would become so valuable? As a youngster, the only time we bought toilet paper in quantity was to TP a few houses as a prank. With all this going on, the panic, the fear, the insanity, I couldn't help but think about God and how He provides for us and how we often take such provisions for granted. In Paul's second letter to those in the church he planted in Corinth, he writes, "For God is the one who gives seed to the farmer and then bread to eat. In the same way, He will give you many opportunities to do good, and He will produce a great harvest of generosity in you." Now, the context of this statement is concerning an offering that Paul is receiving for the Jerusalem church, which had fallen on hard times. Most believe that the Jerusalem church's difficulty was due to persecution. Whatever the pressure, Paul is taking an offering to aid and send to the church in Jerusalem. And he's sending Titus and some other brothers in the faith to receive the offering from the Corinthian believers. Paul, in addressing the Corinthians, reminds them of where all their provisions originate. In other words, everything you have, including that which you are able to give in the offering, comes from God. He does this with an illustration of farming. God provides the seed which the farmer plants. God provides the soil to put the seed in. God provides the rain which causes the seed to germinate and grow. God has engineered the plant which comes from the seed to produce grain, and the grain is what the farmer harvests. And from there, the grain is made into bread which we eat for nourishment. God provides. As I was thinking about the fact that God provides, and in light of the time we are currently in, my mind went back to Elijah, whom we spoke about last week in our devotional on noisy. Elijah is an interesting guy, in that he just shows up in the Old Testament book of 1 Kings. He shows up after the king of Israel, Ahab, marries a non-Jewish gal named Jezebel. Jezebel and Ahab introduced Baal worship to the Israelites. Now, the Old Testament account of Ahab paints him as the worst of all the kings. And if you want to understand what kind of a person Jezebel was, just consider how many mothers and fathers named their precious little girls Jezebel. It's like naming your son Judas. It just doesn't happen. Well, Elijah confronts Ahab about his sin of idolatry and the leading of the nation of Israel into idolatry. He reminds him that God is the God of Israel, not Baal. And then he tells Ahab that Ahab's actions have brought judgment on Israel. The judgment is found in the fact that it won't rain. In fact, there won't be any dew as well. No moisture at all for years until Elijah says so. Guess what? No rain, no dew, the mother of all droughts. Now, after Elijah's meeting with Ahab, God tells Elijah to head down to a brook so he can have water to drink, and he would send ravens to bring food to Elijah. So Elijah camps out at the brook where he could drink, and sure enough, ravens brought his meals to him. It's meals on wings instead of meals on wheels. God provided. Then the drought finally caught up with the brook and it dried up. So God tells Elijah to travel to a village near the city of Sidon. There he would find a widow who would give him shelter and food. So he does, and sure enough, he finds the widow. In fact, he finds the widow is down to her last meal. Not real encouraging. She intends to bake some bread for her and her son, and then the two of them would prepare to die from starvation. But God had other plans. Because she welcomes Elijah, the widow's flour jar never becomes empty, and her oil container never dries up. God provides. Then after 3 years of drought, God instructs Elijah to confront Ahab again. This led to the sacrifice duel we spoke of last week. And as we spoke of last week, the revival Elijah anticipated, along with the repentance of Ahab and Jezebel, well, just never materialized. Instead, Jezebel wanted Elijah dead. So a depressed and dejected Elijah headed for the hills. His first stop was to lie down under a broom tree and sleep. God sent an angel time and again to awaken Elijah, telling him to eat. There before him, every time he woke up, Elijah found food and drink. God provided. Then Elijah went to the cave we spoke of last week, and there God spoke to him in a whisper, a gentle breeze. God spoke to Elijah's fears, and he spoke to his discouragement, and he spoke to his loneliness and his brokenness, and he shared that Elijah was not alone in his devotion to God. God, once again, provided. When things are all well and good, we often forget who provides. It's when we face difficulties we often are awakened and realize that we can lean into God and hold fast, because God has always been our provider. I love the way Paul ends chapter 9 of 2 Corinthians. He ends this discourse on God's provisions and God's people giving to others from those provisions with a great reminder. Paul reminds us of God's greatest provision. Here's what he writes. Thank God for his Son, a gift too wonderful for words.